Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about the natal chart of Salvador Ramos. Some of you may know he is the person that opened fire on a number of students yesterday in Texas, and I believe at least 19 students are dead and one teacher. Anyway, you may want to confer on the internet to find out more precise numbers, because what I'm saying may not be 100% accurate as far as the specifics on the casualties. But the thing about this is, the first thing I want to get, at least one source has him at May 16th, 2004 is his birthday, Sun in Taurus. And what I want to touch up on, the thing I wanted to talk about, maybe think of something, excuse me. Well, I know a lot of this is predicated on other elements of the chart, but notice, Taurus is the sign that we often equate with peace and tranquility and stability. But I don't know, who concurs with this and who doesn't, but there's a number of Taurus people I'll see that, are actually more volatile and turbulent than you would think. There's a number, Taurus, there may be degrees of violence if you believe that there's one website that has certain degrees for Taurus that are more volatile. His sun is positioned close to the fixed star Algol degree, and that degree of Algol is known. It can, in a worse manifestation, it can be a very malevolent degree. And this person, I've heard there was one article, it may have been on the Daily Beast, but you may want to check on that, confirm that it stated. There were some sources, some people had stated that he was like a bully, and then some had stated in the article that it was the other way around. Maybe he was a little bit of a bully anyway. His moon is in either Aries or Taurus, depending on time of birth, and the fact that he had this connection with these weapons and had a militant side to him, my feeling is that his moon was probably in Aries. Now, I had, of course, improvised once again and do a solar/sunrise birth time, and puts the moon at 25 degrees Aries, conjunct his Mercury in Taurus, and puts it in the 12th house. Some may have thought he had, some kind of mental illness. I mean, when you do something like this, I'd say there's a very good probability of this. This is something where, and I want to talk about, the thing about, and again, Taurus could actually have, more, it seems like, even though it's a sign of peace and being passive, Taurus can be very, when pushed to their brink, they can, of course, become very turbulent and volatile. And this is something, obviously, he took this to more of an extreme than you would think, though. When you're killing like 19 people or 20 people, whatever the amount was. And I'm going to continue to talk about some natal placements and transits he had in his chart that may have been, attributed to what transpired, sadly. My understanding is, at least, there was, according to a text, that he shot his grandmother in the head. My understanding, too, is, though, that the grandmother was currently in a hospital. And I don't know if she actually got shot in the head or in another part of her body, but he apparently had sent a text that stated that he stated that he shot his grandmother in the head. And he does have, I'm looking at a chart, he has Mars in its fall in Cancer. Mars in Cancer by itself can indicate contentious situations with the family. And basically, you're trying to fight just for survival in a lot of instances. I have my Mars in Cancer. I do believe it's actually one of the worst placements in the zodiac. It can show very turbulent situations with the home, family. The mother, I think it was the mother's live-in boyfriend, had stated that the situation was turbulent with the mother, even though the mother herself stated, his mother herself stated that the relationship was actually very good. I don't know which one is actual fact, but if I had to lean toward one, my feeling on that is that it probably wasn't good. When you look at the fact that he has his Mars in the zodiac sign Cancer, and he also has Saturn in Cancer. Saturn, of course, is in its detriment in Cancer. That could indicate, a lot of restrictions and limitations with the home and family life. It could be restricting in expressing sympathy and care, empathy toward others. Um, that could also be difficulties with the mother. Um, in the solar sunrise chart, it falls in the second house of self-worth and self-esteem. So there might have been issues with his self-worth and self-esteem that were attributed to that. And I had a prominent family member that had Mars in Cancer and Saturn in Cancer, and the situation with the family was not good. And my Mars again is in the zodiac sign Cancer, and I have not had exactly a stupendous family life. My Black Moon Lilith also falls in my fourth house, which certainly doesn't help matters. Um, Another thing too, in his chart, one thing that stands out sadly is that he has his Venus opposing his Pluto in Sagittarius, and that aspect by itself, I would say, could suggest having difficulty in having control in relationships. Venus being in Gemini, those relationships might be very fickle and mercurial. It might be ones that kind of come and go, people coming and going in one's life. I have my moon in Gemini, which is similar, because the people that even I can be close to home with seem like they come in and out of my life very quickly. They're not, the connections are far from sustained, and he might have had some issues being able to control the relationships, or it could also indicate that he could have been very manipulative and controlling in those relationship situations. Now, the thing about this too is there's also something that was stated that he may have sent some kind of inappropriate text to women. They may have been salacious. And Taurus, in a very negative manifestation, could be very crude and lewd. And when you're talking about very negative Taurus energy, and the thing about this too is, he obviously may have had some difficulties in those relationships again. And another thing about him too is that he was also, I don't know if he had been ridiculed for this, but apparently he had some stutter according to the article. He has Mercury in Taurus. It falls in the 12th house of limitations in his chart. And Taurus can be known if there's any kind of speech issue, it would be stuttering would be one that would come to mind. At the time, too, he also had transit Pluto, making a loose conjunction to his natal Chiron in Capricorn. And Pluto can be associated with death, but also murder as well. And this is where the deaths took on a lot of suffering and wounds. And when you have transit Pluto hitting the Chiron, that is one way that could manifest. In most cases, when people have this transit, though, they're not going to go on shooting rampage. In most cases, if somebody has a transit Pluto, close proximity to their natal Chiron, it could manifest in maybe physical related issues that are Pluto related. There could be suffering, anguish. It might be physical related issues, say with the knees, the bones, the joints, the hamstrings, or it could be some psychological issues, maybe with depression. Could be another way it could manifest, or a person might be going through suffering, having to deal with death of somebody in their life. And a lot of the who would be predicated on the house that transit would fall on. Now, this is also a time, I think about this, somebody shooting a grandparent and shooting all these kids, and this is just very horrific. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Steve Kerr, who is a prolific NBA coach, had actually spoke out about this situation. I mean, we need to get this thing, basically somehow contained. You're not going to eradicate this completely, but it's important to get this to a level where it's, where it's not like, completely, like the way it is right now. I mean, we're having such like preposterous numbers that are related to these mass shootings. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, he was also stated to be like a loner and very introverted. I mean, Mars and Cancer, of course, can be known to expend a lot of energy in introverted activities. I mean, I again have Mars and Cancer. Um, and then looking at the solar sunrise chart, it puts the moon and Mercury in the 12th house of solitude and seclusion. Mercury in the 12th house by itself can indicate limitations in communications. And Taurus people in general, I've noticed, they're not really about having an abundance of communications in their life. Many Taurus people don't have much, connections beyond their work sphere. I mean, when I was at, a regular, job, like when I worked at Kmart, what I would do is I would work and I would go home, and that would be, what I would do. They were talking about somebody on TV one time, but this guy's name, I believe, is Michael DeParvine. He was featured on Forensic Files, and he was a Sun in Taurus, and he did the same thing that I did. Only difference is I didn't murder anybody, but I mean, they said he had basically a monotonous existence. He would work and then he would go home. And this wouldn't surprise me if this was similar to this person, that Salvador Ramos, that he had a similar kind of lifestyle. Now, he was in school, but he apparently did not graduate school. And people, someone, at least one person has stated he had become like more isolated or more reclusive or something after, he couldn't graduate, and he was obviously going, had some anger issues, in the solar sunrise chart. Aries on the 12th house cusp can indicate very suppressed anger. Um, and the thing about this is as well, um, the ruler, he is in the solar sunrise chart, he has the zodiac sign Cancer on the 3rd house cusp, and the ruler of the moon falls in the 12th house of mental illness. This could suggest some limitations in rational thinking. He may very well have had a mental illness. I'm sure he likely did. I mean, somebody that does, commits this heinous kind of act, you figure there likely was something, going on with him that just psychologically, mentally was not right, and that was unstable. The solar sunrise time also puts Mercury in a conjunction with the moon, so the emotions may have dominated his thinking to some degree. And being the moon could be in Aries, depending on birth time, could be very, acrimonious, angry type of feelings and emotions. And there were some stories on here on that article I read online about, he was stated that at least one person would say that he was egging cars, shooting vehicles randomly or something with BB guns. I'm thinking of Sun and Taurus doing this. I understand the Sun in Taurus is near that fixed star algol, and he likely has the moon in Aries depending on birth time, but he may also have a completely different ascendant, as most people do, because there's only, like a 1 in 12 probability that you're going to have the same rising sign as your sun sign. So that could be the case as well, that his ascendant, may be completely different. He could have an ascendant like in Aries or Leo sign that would be, a little bit, more propensity toward volatility than you would, than the typical, than Taurus. So that's likely what the case is in his chart as well. And it's something we don't know because we don't know the time of birth. And the thing is, and he had been seeing the boyfriend of the living boyfriend of the boy's mother had stated something, he was weird or something. And interestingly enough, in the solar sunrise chart, he has Aquarius on the midheaven. That could be that reputation for being, for being eccentric, being a little bit bizarre. So there's really not much more for me to say on this. As far as his chart goes and transits that might have resonated with this the shooting. He did have transit Mars in Pisces at the time in the 11th house of the solar sunrise chart. And as I stated yesterday, Mars was at 29 degrees Pisces. It's the fixed star sheet degree, and it's a degree of homicide. And this is something where he went into a complete frenzy, complete rage, and it just really makes you wonder what's going on with these people. Why aren't these people, being treated if they do have the ones that do have mental illness that commit these crimes? I saw something. Basically, my understanding is from what I've researched online, is that there's 1 in 5 people, I guess it's the United States anyway, 1 in 5 people are diagnosed with a mental illness, but 1 in 4 have a treatable mental illness, because you have a certain percentage that has issues mentally, but they're not treated for it. Whether it's because of pride, because they have the issue and they don't want to, they don't want to go and get it treated, or maybe it could be a situation where they're oblivious to it, or maybe they don't really recognize that they have some mental issue going on. But it just shows you we don't really always know who's who. Somebody that can appear, very kind, very benevolent, superficially may not always be that way. But anyway, people, and the last thing I want to say, I said in the previous video, but for those that didn't say it, I want to say here that my prayers again and condolences go out to the close friends and family members of the victims. Anyway, people, Edwin Learnard saying, till next time, stay well.